Hello, this is Greg Allison from Green Greg's Garden and Worm Farm, coming to you from the woods next to my garden behind my house. And I'm talking to you now about the challenges. In fact, we're going to talk about 8 key challenges facing us in the 2020s. What you need to be aware of and prepare for. What you need to take into consideration. And we're going to end with kind of a segue on the 8th challenge and how it actually segues into the 2030s and what may be planned for us in the 2030s. What does that mean? Is the 2020s just a run-up to the 2030s? Well, there's a possibility of that, and we're going to discuss that. So we're going to start out with China is number 1. Greg, why is China number 1? Because China has 4 times as many people as the United States. China, if they were half as productive, if the people in China were half as productive as the people in America, then their economy would be twice as big. That means they could afford twice the military, twice the global influence, and they are taking other steps to attain more global influence. In spite of that, you also have to factor in the fact that a dollar in China goes much farther, about many times much more capability than it does in America. So having twice the money, or even having the same money for defense, means probably 4 times more military, because the Chinese dollar goes the Chinese yuan, the money, the dollar equivalent in China, goes so much farther there than it does here. Labor's cheaper, materials are cheaper. They're not encumbered with all the regulations internally that our systems are, so they can perform faster, cheaper. They can produce stuff that is kind of like we used to 40 years ago in this country. They are quite capable of producing a lot fast. So China is definitely a rising power, and the United States is a waning power. And that brings into play another concept known as Thucydides' trap. Thucydides' trap is the idea that was brought forward by Graham Allison. I covered that in one of my other videos. Thucydides was the first historian who talked about the war between Sparta and Athens. That's what he wrote about in his first history writings. And he wrote about the dynamics of how a rising power like Athens threatens an established power like Sparta, and how that leads to war. And it just so happens that in the last 500 years, Graham Allison has identified 16 instances in which you had a rising power facing an established power, and of those 16, 12 of them led to war. So what happened in the other 4 cases? Well, the first of the cases was Portugal and Spain back in the late 1500s. That did not result in war, and it might have been more related to the church, or I don't know why that case didn't result in war. Those historians among you, feel free to comment on that below. One of the other cases was, of course, the United States and Great Britain at early 1900s, but the United States was saving Great Britain's rear end in World War I and World War II. We were allies, and so the Great Britain wasn't about to declare war on the United States when we were surpassing them. They needed us badly, and we performed and saved their rear ends. Another case is today, from the 90s to the present, of Germany and Europe supplanting the UK and France. Well, it just so happens that they're all in one gigantic economic union with the European Union, so you don't expect to see a war there this time. Was it the case with World War I and World War II? Now, was it? Now, the other case, the only other case, was the United States and Russia, the Soviet Union to be more specific. Now, the Soviet Union was the rising power and had a lot of military capability, as Russia does today, but it did not, in the case of the Soviet Union, lead to a direct war with the United States. We had a Cold War, and it had some hot pockets and corners, but we basically had a Cold War. Russia never had the capacity to surpass the United States economically. They didn't have the natural resources. They didn't have the farmland. The population isn't near as big. Their communist system had disincentive to industrial productivity, to productivity in general. The people could not be as productive. Russia is a third world country, except for, it's nice around, St. Petersburg, it's nice around Moscow. I've been to Moscow. Hey, I enjoyed my trip there. I enjoyed the place. I enjoyed the people there. All that said, people are people anywhere. I tell you that in this video. So whatever I say about peoples, whatever I say about countries, whatever I say about these matters, is that there's good people everywhere. good and bad. It's no different. People are people anywhere on earth. It's the powers, the governments that twist things around, and other organizations within our society that lead us to conflict. And conflict should not be. We should find other ways around it. However, that's where we're at, and that's part of what we're talking about here. So back to China. The powers that be in China, of course, want to grow and maintain their power. The people want more economic prosperity, of course. So therein lies the rub. China is an ascending power, and they're ascending rapidly. Even though they're having a little bit of an economic stalemate right now, they're reaching out and making networks and alliances. They're building the 9-line atolls into islands, artificial islands, and they're turning those artificial islands into unsinkable air carriers right now, Spratly Islands and throughout the South China Sea. They're taking that entire area, and don't expect them to give it up, even though it does not fit with the UN Treaty of the Law of the Sea, as we call it, UNCLOS. The other thing to consider is that China is also reaching out into the Pacific Islands. They're making deals. They're buying out governments in those islands, essentially, and cutting deals. I cover this in another video, but what that means is they're extending their influence, they're extending their access to resources vastly, and they're going to get more votes in the UN, because part of the deal is these countries have to vote with China in the UN. There's a whole lot of little island nations there that could definitely give China a lot more sway in the UN. So in the world body, China's power will grow. And we'll also talk about China a little bit in our last topic on number 8. So China is growing, ascending. So going back to the Thucydides trap and the cases where there could be war, like I said, a couple of these cases, you know, we basically had alliances like in the European Union and with the United States and Great Britain. So you would not expect to see a war there. Russia just didn't have the oomph to overcome the United States in reality. And so what happened is the United States spent defense spending to the point that we broke Russia's ability to keep up with us. They couldn't keep pace with us because we did have a bigger economy. And that's why the Soviet Union collapsed. It was our Star Wars, our SDI, Strategic Defense Initiative, is thought by many to have collapsed the Soviet Union. There's one other thing that probably kept us from going into a hot war with the Soviet Union, that being that mutually assured destruction is a really ugly perspective. When everybody dies, how do you win that war? So, although there's those that say, hey, they're dug in, and actually the Russians do have far more protection for the people. Putin just did an exercise in Moscow about a year ago in which they put 40 million people in underground shelters in Moscow alone. So they're better positioned than we are in those regards. We don't want to see a war. There's a lot of people that advocate war in this country. There are some people that think we should have war with China now while we're still somewhat ahead to stop them from rising in power. That's a very dangerous concept. And maybe that kind of thinking is why we could have a war with China. If China suspected even that we were going to do something like that, they might be tempted to do something. Maybe they would use a pawn state like North Korea to instigate some action. How would they do that, Greg? Well, all they got to do is take the paranoid leader there and convince him in some fashion that we're going to take action against him, and bad outcomes could take place. Maybe China wouldn't be beyond doing a false flag. This is purely speculative. Maybe they wouldn't be beyond pulling a false flag on North Korea. If they did that and they got caught at it, what's North Korea going to do? They absolutely have to have China. You know, it might be they wouldn't trust China anymore, but China would have to be desperate to do something like that. I don't think they're that desperate. At least not now. Unless they really thought that we were going to hit them, I'm sure they would prefer to use a client state to do their dirty work. And North Korea might be a good pawn to play in a game like that. Yeah, it's not much of a game, it's a sad situation. So China is a threat in a sense because of the Thucydides trap concept. Because of that, we might really expect to see a war with them. If not, if there's not going to be a war with them, there's definitely the economic competition. There's the competition for control on the global scale. We have to, maybe in America, accept the idea that we're not going to be the dominant country in the world. And how could we be with a place like China, with their capacity, with the way they're reaching out? How do we retain dominance? And see, in our minds, Americans, we're number one. But you got to remember, in Mandarin China, the word China actually means center of the universe. They see themselves as number one. They see the last century, what we call the American century, is their century of humiliation. And there's nothing like a humiliated people rising to power to assert and claim what they think is theirs. And they think the world should orbit around and serve China. And they're taking some really good steps right now to make sure that happens. How do we deal with that as the United States of America coming off of our American century? I don't know. But I'm telling you, that is the big question in the room, one of the big questions. But we've got 7 more things to cover here, and these 7 more things are very significant. Any of them could play in and change the whole dynamic. Our economy is next. The reason I'm covering the economy next is our economy's been on an abnormally long growth spurt ever since the 2008 crash. And the 2008 crash, as bad as it was, didn't have all the effects it could have had. It could have been much worse. And essentially, we propped up the banks instead of propping up and helping the people who were hurting and causing the economic crisis by walking out on homes and mortgages and things like that. We propped the banks up instead. Of course, the banks are going to get theirs. Ha ha ha. Figure that one. Those banksters. Now, that said, we're in the same situation today in terms of debts and risk that we were in 2008. And there's other indices of an economic collapse this time around that are real strong. It's not happening yet. It's surprising a lot of people. That's because the system is being artificially propped up. How long can this bubble continue? It's not. Eventually it's going to burst, and it don't matter who's president, sooner or later it's going to burst, and there's nothing you can do about it. Just how long can you put it off? I don't know. There's a lot of variabilities that go into that. Everybody's trying to push it off as far as possible, but sooner or later that bubble is going to burst, and this time it may burst bad and hard. So the economy is definitely something to be greatly concerned with. Number 3, climate, food. This is the 29th day of December. We're expecting storms here in North Alabama today. You see all these clouds? I follow the concept of grand solar minimum, which says we're going to get more cloud nucleation due to cosmic rays, that as Earth's magnetic field wanes, that the jet stream gets more serpentine. It's not constrained as much. It's not zonal as much. And if you look over the last few years, you can see that the jet stream, especially the last couple of years, and last year in particular, has been snaking around further south and north than ever, causing Norway to get hot, and Florida even to get cold. I mean, we have wild temperature swings, wild climate. It's warm here. I'm wearing just a shirt, a river shirt, unbuttoned, and I'm comfortable today here in the wintertime, but it's going to get cold right after this. So that's not good. We are in one of those serpentine jet stream situations. It's about to bring us some bad weather. Whether you subscribe to grand solar minimum or global warming, in either event, either case, you can expect climatic challenges. And one of the prime ways that manifests itself is crop loss. I've talked about coming food shortages in videos, going back to last spring, in which I said we're going to have these late season rains, that they're going to stop and slow down planting of crops or flooded out early crops, and then we're going to have early season frost and snows. All that did take place, just like I had predicted based on this notion of a grand solar minimum, or at least a deep solar minimum that we're in. And solar cycle 24 has been a low solar cycle, which I'm going to come back to the solar cycles in a moment. So food prices you can expect to go up. You can expect other climatic changes, fuel prices. What's it going to do? Is it going to strain our power grid? Which I'm going to go into that next. What will the climate do to us? It's going to wreck our economy. It's going to cause our food prices to go up. This is why you need to grow your own food. This is why you need to store food, to buy food storage now while it's still somewhat affordable. Go ahead and get it. Check my link below to my Patriot Supply, where you can buy a year's supply of food for just a couple of bucks a meal. Check those links. Check the link to True Leaf Market, where you can get heirloom seeds. You need to know how to grow your own food. And I show you in many videos how to do that. There's my raised bed garden in the foreground and my aquaponics greenhouse in the background. And I get people unsubscribing in droves every time I do a video on aquaponics. Come on, guys. Do you want to survive, or do you want to starve? You know, sooner or later your stores of food are going to run out. Sooner or later you might find the only thing you can really carry on you easily is seed when you're prepping and escaping. So this is why the food shortages, the food challenges are going to get severe. I expect them to get very severe. And the economic problems on top of that are not going to help. But power grid failure. The power grid is one of our key risks, and I've talked about that extensively in many videos. I have told you how if the power grid goes down, the EMP Congressional Task Force estimated that 9 out of 10 people would die within a year, and why it would actually be worse than that due to farmers not growing their own food. Why preppers would die, because preppers don't grow their own food and think their food storages are going to carry them through, or think their big hunting rifles are going to feed them. No, they're not. Check my videos and you'll see why I make those cases. But if you really want to prep, you better know how to take care of yourself. That's why you need to watch my videos. That's why you need to subscribe. Check the update notification bell to see my videos. I'm trying to teach you everything I can to get you to have just a basic knowledge to survive, thrive, and stay out of the hive. And I cover topics that will help you stay aware and prepare, so you can keep your eyes open and head on a swivel. That's what you need to do, and that's what I cover. I'm trying to help you with that. So back to the power grid. I'm talking about the power grid going down. I'm talking about, oh yeah, I sell worms too for your gardening. Check out my worm site, www.greengregswormfarm.com or greengregs.com. So you need to know that the power grid can go down for several reasons. It might be terrorism, which is something I'm going to touch on another topic. It could be war, the various pressures upon us for warfare. But right now I'm thinking that solar coronal mass ejection, a solar flare, or even a filament, or possibly even a coronal hole ion wind from the sun, solar wind, might be the instigating factor to bring down our power grid, because Earth's magnetic field is dropping strong. I just covered that in a previous video. Earth's magnetic field is dropping. It's dropping fast. The drop rate is accelerating. In 1859, the magnetic field was still pretty strong, because it just started dropping in the 1840s. And at first of all, it's not dropping as fast as it is today. So we're about 75% of the field strength where we were then, and it's starting to plummet. The magnetic field is our protection. And what it means is that a solar flare, a much smaller solar flare, could take out our power grid. We could have other effects from a solar flare, of course, I cover them, or radiation, should we have, then particularly from solar flares, with the loss of our power grid, not with the loss of our magnetic field, excuse me. So if we lose our power grid, we could be in dire straits. A lot of you always tell me, Greg, it'd be a good thing if we lose our power grid, because the kids can't be on their phones, and people will have to learn to work right and eliminate certain aspects of our society, the control matrix, and all these kind of things. Well, that may be, but the problem with the power grid going down is we have over 74,000, I think it's getting up to about 80,000 metric tons of spent fuel rods in the cooling pools at the nuclear reactor plants, and that's almost 300 times more radioactive material than is in all the nuclear warheads on Earth, just waiting for the lights to go out to go up in smoke. I cover that in more detail in some of my previous videos. Please go through and look at them. Gag, you're crazy, how can it be? Go watch my videos on it, please. This is going to be a long video as is, so I'll have to reference other sources. I do encourage you to watch them. But power grid failure is definitely something you need to be aware of and prepare for. Be aware and prepare. Don't be scared, be prepared. Okay, item number 5, civil conflict. In America today, we are divided. We're divided more than we've been in any time since the 1860s. In the 1860s, we had a problem, big problem, as many of you are aware. And it did not fare well for the American people, because the conflict of that era killed more Americans than any other conflict we were in. It took until recent times for the casualties and deaths from other similar conflicts to add up to equal the conflicts of that era, including past the World War II. All that said, Greg, that's crazy talk. How in the world could this be such a concern today? Consider Virginia. Consider what's happening there. Considering that to go national. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Consider this. In 1860, it was the idea that the North would dominate presidential elections from then out that caused the South to break away. Today, the domination by predominant urban over predominantly not urban areas and presidential votes is going to have the same effect. After the Trump presidency is ended, whenever that may be, what we're going to see is the nation's demographic is changing. It's changing such a way that the Democratic Party, unless something major changes, could definitely dominate politics in the foreseeable future. They could have the House, the Senate, and the presidency from there out. And what they will probably choose to do is much the same as what Virginia is now choosing to do with regards to the Second Amendment and the citizens of Virginia. And on a national scale, that is not going to go over well at all. I get comments from, and I see on my channel, and I see comments on other channels. It indicates to me just how that may run. And it's not going to end too well for the predominantly urban people. They think that they will be smug in their dominance, but they are proceeding from false premises and a false sense of self-security. They claim they're going to do all these things for safety. Well, yeah. Hitler took up the guns in his country for the safety of his people too, right? You see how that worked out. So, civil conflict. It could go very bad very soon. I'm still expecting, I'm not saying I'm for or against Trump in this video. What I'm saying is this, is that the people that vote for him are more of the rugged individualistic style. They are the people who want to get rid of the deep state. The deep state is a problem, and that's a virtuous goal. Trump can't do it. If he can't even get his own Department of Justice to take action against people that are clear criminals. They won't do it. So it's because the deep state is embedded in every department in government. But when his era is over, expect things may not go to your favor. And even if you think they're going to your favor, if you're on the other side of the aisle, then you might be surprised that the outcomes may not be at all what you expect. So all that said, I don't want to belabor this point anymore. I'm just letting you know that there may be an era of civil conflict coming. It could be the ugliest thing you could ever imagine. That coupled with the economy, food shortages, oh my gosh, yeah. When would that happen? Well, about 2025, 2026, if Trump gets reelected, then his administration ends in 2024. The next one takes power in 2025. Give them 2026 to start enacting their laws, and they're going to meet resistance. Absolutely. Of course, maybe the powers that be want that. They would probably like to take down the United States of A in order to promote globalism. The United States of A stands in the way of globalism today. And those of us who tend toward the rugged individualistic thought set, they do not like us. I'm going to talk about that in my last point. So, in point number 8. So moving on. Point 6, war, terrorism. War and terrorism. I talked about China. Well, China's not the only other country in the world that causes the United States concern. Maybe we've been too preoccupied with the other countries to sufficiently pay attention to China. Russia. I don't believe we should have war with Russia, but a lot of people do for some reason. But having war with Russia would be suicide. Russia has the Tsar-Bomba. They are now equipping torpedoes with Tsar-Bombas. It could cause tsunamis. One detonation could take out an entire coastal area of the United States. 2 detonations, 3, one off the Gulf and each ocean, and the United States is essentially done. Or 1 EMP superweapon. Of course, there are many other countries that have EMP superweapons. I'm not even talking about them using all their hypersonic missiles. Hey, we have missile defense. Our missile defense is puny. It wouldn't, even if Russia used their old ICBMs, they have so many of them, it would overcome our missile defense system. Our missile defense system is supposedly built to protect us from North Korea. Of course, it could even be oversaturated by North Korea. And of course, if North Korea really want to attack us, the first thing they'd probably do is have a device on one of those satellites they're sending over, fractured orbital bombardment concept, and just detonate it over the United States with an EMP superweapon. Yeah, North Korea is another one of those countries. And yes, North Korea is playing us. They always do. They play everybody. Madeleine Albright and President Clinton made permanent peace in North Korea, right? Haha. Let's see how that went. What did it enable them to do, this so-called peace that Madeleine Albright went in there and arranged with them? It enabled them to build more nuclear reactors. Gee, North Korea knows how to play us. They absolutely do, and that's their game, and they play it well. We may put sanctions on them and squeeze them a little bit here and there, but hey, that serves their great leader, because he gets to say, hey, you need me because these guys over here are going to attack you. See, that's how those politics work. So then there's Iran. We talk about having war with Iran. Or is something going to happen there? All they got to do is, they don't have to have, they're developing nukes. They're close to it, perhaps. They do have the ability to launch a satellite. So they can do an ICBM. They can definitely do a lot of damage in the Middle East. They have a powerful military. Iran is not to be taken lightly, but with regards to the United States, regards to right here, it's said that they have sleeper cells. And a few sleeper cells and just a little bit of money, I mean not thousands of dollars, not millions of dollars, you could bring down a multi-trillion-dollar economy by taking out key essential transformer stations, power substations, just 9 of which could do the job. And the head of the Republic Guard of Iran said that, hey, we've targeted 20 already. So I've talked about that in other videos. These little countries can be a bigger threat than you think. We're used to be able to go in and mopping up anywhere we want. Iran is not some of these other little countries. North Korea now has significant capabilities. So we have to think about these things. Other little wars could lead to bigger wars. And if we get in a war with China, for example, Russia is an ally of China. We could pull Russia into that. If we get in a war with Russia, we can pull China in. Iran is an ally to both of those countries. So is Syria to some degree. I'm not sure that Russia or China are willing to risk a full-blown war with the United States over Syria. They're not, but Russia don't want to give up their port on the Mediterranean either. So there's a lot to be taken into consideration for war and for terrorism. Terrorism sponsored by Iran, perhaps, by other countries, terrorist organizations employing the techniques I just mentioned about direct ballistic attack on our substations, like the one that happened in the Metcalf station near San Jose, and I've talked about that to a great extent in my other videos. So if you look at these kind of attacks, you realize that it doesn't take a lot to really do this country in. That's why I so advocate power grid defense. It's that even the little countries can do a number on us. So I'm coming now to item number 7, pandemic. Hey, the world today is a big petri dish, one big petri dish. At one time, a disease that might kill a tribe would burn out at that tribal area, to borders of that town, most likely, because there wasn't so much transportation. Today, people over the world mingle extensively, thanks to our global international air traffic, people moving around, migrations. There's extensive mixing of people and populations, and it's reaching into the most rural reaches of Africa, where people are flying here from there and there to here and all over the world. And what that means is that, and also we have more and more predominantly much higher populations living in cities. So all these are ripe petri dishes for a pandemic that could arise and take out a big chunk of our population. The Center for Disease Control, CDC in Atlanta, Georgia, it talks about being afraid of disease X. They don't even want to name it. It's some unknown, probably not existent disease today that's going to come out of the jungle or swamp somewhere and get us. Disease X is what they're concerned with. Could that get us? Yes, it could. What would it mean? Pandemic is definitely on the scope for something that could take us out in the 2020s. Something that could do major damage. You factor it in with economic damages, with food shortages, and also just the whole changing climate in eras of grand solar minimum. With more cloud cover, you get more mold and disease occurring anyway. The bubonic plague, I think, was occurring in such eras. So wheat losses due to mold. Yeah, there's so much that all these things interplay. These things are not disconnected that I've been talking about. So now the 8th and final one that I'm going to talk about is the hive. I did a video, 2 videos about the hive actually, and I tell you to survive, thrive, and stay out of the hive. What is the hive, Greg? It's the integration of technology that are pulling us in deeper and deeper into a total control matrix. A control matrix beyond that which we see today with the social media in China with their social credit score system. And that is a hive, by the way, and we're somewhat in a hive today, but we don't have the direct implants in the brain, so we're somewhat limited. We do have a lot of social media with our devices, such as our cell phones. And yeah, they listen to us, they spy on us, they know everything you do, they know where you go, they know everything you buy. Every text, every type, every keystroke. They can have all that information, and all is stored in big national computer centers, and it looks like they're even forming profiles on each person in this country to model what you might do. They can even tell you with a 90% probability where you'll be in any given hour. So if they want to come get you, they pretty much know where to go. Is that scary? Look, what we're doing in this country is we're giving up our freedoms and our rights. And if you don't have freedoms and rights, how do you fight back? I mean, if the media is all controlled, then you only hear what they tell you. If you can't speak, you can't speak. I mean, guys, without the reason we have a Bill of Rights, the reason we have freedoms is to prevent tyranny. It's to prevent the overlords, the governments from taking over, to taking control. With power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. We're giving absolute power to smaller and smaller circles of people. Do you trust that? Do you really feel comfortable with that? I think you probably, most of you do. But you need to reconsider what it really means. What are the real human dynamics? And also this whole system might be hacked by some snot-nosed kid in grandma's basement. And maybe that person will become the queen bee of the hive as it emerges. Hive tech arms race is what we're facing, because all these different companies and individuals are all racing to develop more and more hive type technology and to lure you in more and more. Facebook has algorithms to make it give you a sense of reward, a satisfaction when you click on stuff, when you get likes. It's addicting, and they know it, and so they plan it all like that accordingly. We are essentially in a virtual social credit system already, and we've put ourselves there. It's not like China's, but already the UN is considering China's ID system of face recognition to be the model for what they want to do. And as China gets more and more power in the UN, which that's happening already, you can expect to see their systems more and more favored. You got to remember, David Rockefeller was very much in favor of the Chinese model. Why is it that the richest people in the world seem to favor communism and socialism? Well, it's not really true communism, is it? When you have a country like China that has the second most billionaires in the world, isn't a communist society supposed to be classless? Yeah, they've got their escape clause. The powers that be, no, they're going to be well taken care of. What they want to do in this hive system is lure you in. What they want to do is have more and more people living off of the dole of the government, so that they get more and more votes until they have absolute control. Once they have absolute control, they have another name for those kind of people. When you're living off the government, living wage. There's a term for that. And the powers that be that want to lure you into that don't even like it. So they have a term for that. They call those people useless eaters. So they want to lure you into being a useless eater. Well, once you're a useless eater, you're of no value, and they're already in power, and you have no rights. They can do whatever they want to do. They don't need you any longer. You are an expense, an excess to the system. it becomes to the interest of the system to eliminate you. Oh, it's interesting. The same people talk about population control continuously. They talk about we have too many people continuously. They've put up the guidestones in Georgia. Go listen to several of the elites talk about population, about how we have too many people. Bill Gates being a principal among them. Oprah Winfrey being among them. So there are a lot of these people who talk quite a bit about this. So do not trust the fly bait. Yeah, it's sweet. It's sweet. They're trying to lure you in. I will do a video on socialism in the future. It is fly bait. It is sweet. They're trying to lure you in, suck you in. But like fly bait, it's also poison. So the 2030s. How does this play into the 2030s? Well, there's a certain agenda called 2030. And all you got to do is go to the UN websites, and there it is. If you do research on the writings of the various authors of this to see what they actually are calling for, what they have in mind, you really begin to understand what's there and what it's really leading us to. We're talking taking everybody off the farms, off their land. They don't want people to be independent. They want you to be dependent, because if you're independent, they can't control you. This is all about control. They want to put you in rack and stack ISO shipping container housing next to the railroad track. Yeah, is Auschwitz down the track? This is not a pretty picture, my friends. This is not where you want to go. This is what you want to stay out of. That's why I tell you to survive, thrive, and stay out of the hive. And this is why we're going to need to form tribes, and we're going to have to be resilient to resist the pressures to put us all in rack and stack shipping containers. They want to declare areas such as this off limits. They want to take all these small independent farms and eliminate them. They want to have everything produced by large corporate farms. So you're eating their pesticides, their GMOs, their nutrient depleted food, their food that causes sickness. Why not cause sickness? What do they care? There's too many people already in the first place. And besides, the medical industry is a huge lobby in their system. So, it's fly poison. They sell ideas based on things that sound good, like they're trying to help people. That's how they always bait their trap. But sooner or later the trap springs and you're caught in it. And that's not a good thing. So the 2030s, if we should get there, may be much worse. So what you need to know about the 2020s is this is your chance to be aware and prepare so that you can survive, thrive, and stay out of the hive. And that's what I'm here to tell you. That's what this whole channel is doing right now. It's telling you what you need to know to survive, what you need to know to thrive, and that you do need to stay out of the hive. That's the kind of stuff we cover. That's what I'm here about. That's why you need to subscribe to my channel if you're not subscribed. That's why you need to bang the update notification bell. If you want to grow your own garden, like my raised beds here, if you want to be able to not have to go to the stores to buy supplies because the stores won't be there, then you need to have a worm farm. You need to grow your own worms to recycle your leaves, kitchen waste, so you can rapidly turn it back into your garden. That you can have worm tea to fight insects and do other things to promote the growth of your garden, restoring your soil microbiome. I don't know if you can see the garlic sprouting up there. You need to have heirloom seeds, because you're not going to be able to go to the store and buy seeds again. The hybrid seeds are not going to be available. That's why you need to go to True Leaf Market. And also, I do advocate storage of food. So go to My Patriot Supply. You can also buy prepper supplies, all kind of prepper supplies at My Patriot Supply. So check these links out below that will help you thrive, survive, and stay out of the hive. So my friends, this is a long video, but the 2020s are going to be a time of challenge. It is my true hope that my concerns, these are real concerns. China is definitely out there. They're definitely growing. Their influence is increasing. The economy is on a teeter, and I do expect a collapse. Our climate is wonky. Civil conflict, yeah, we're already there, and this could get worse. War terrorism is always present. Pandemics are a present threat. Maybe we'll be lucky. That is my hope. Maybe we'll be lucky and we'll skate through all these things, and the 2030s will just be another decade of great growth beyond a great growth period in the 2020s. And if so, mankind might escape into space, into the cosmos, and be building all kind of habitats there to make our species more survivable in the long term. But that's my big hope, and that we can survive, thrive, and survive right here on Earth, that we can have our communities, our tribes, that will have many other benefits to the formation of being able to work together. I mean, look at this, guys. What we do know is that this is a way of life. This is a choice. It's a lifestyle choice to farm. It's a lifestyle choice to grow food in this manner, because one, there's a lot of reward in doing this, to see the productivity of what you can produce. There's a lot of reward in growing things, just a psychological reward. There's a reward for being in nature. There's a reward for knowing that you can live off this stuff even if you have to, which I cover in many of my videos. It is a lifestyle choice. It is not just a matter of pure economics of growing the most food, the cheapest. It's also growing better food, higher quality food, being able to grow things that add real nutrition, unlike what the industrial agriculture is producing today. Yeah, the food may be cheap, but you're paying for it by increased medical bills. You're paying for it by eating cardboard food with less taste. You want taste? Have good soil, good flavor. This is where you get the flavor. This is where you get the taste. This is where you get the nutrients. This is where you get the food that's healthful to you so that you can survive, thrive, and stay out of the hive. And that's why you need to watch this channel. I think that's part of the hopes of the 2020s, is that we can band together. We can use the force of our numbers. We can use our community to ensure that we don't fall into these various traps, that we need to be aware of what's happening internationally so that we can apply pressure as need to be to the powers that be, that we can insulate ourselves from the other things that's happening in the world as best as we possibly can. That is what I'm covering. That's why I want you to watch. That's why I want you to subscribe and watch as many of my videos as you can. That's why I want you to get involved in forming these communities that I talk about. So with that, I'll leave you on a note of hope that we may not fall in this, and that you can be a key difference in making these things happen. Like Rex Bear says, be the change you want to see. I think we're going to win. I do. But we have to be aware to prepare and make that happen. And that's why I'm here. There's to be one more voice to enable that. And that's why you've watched this video this long, apparently. So thank you very much for watching.